This is Building Tomorrow, the Society of Construction Law Australia podcast.
On the show, you'll hear real conversations about what matters most to the people behind the scenes who are shaping Australian construction.
From lawyers and contract administrators to engineers, commercial managers, consultants, and all the other experts forging the future of Australian infrastructure today. I'm Mawona Matanda.
I'm BJ Lomsao.
And I'm Jennifer Raphael.
Today we're chatting with Andrew Chapman, CEO of the Queensland Major Contractors Association, which represents the companies delivering Queensland's major roads, rail, energy, and civil infrastructure projects across the state. In this episode, Andrew shares his insights into Queensland's $127 billion major projects pipeline, the real constraints affecting delivery, and why productivity, procurement, and contracting models are now more than ever central to getting the projects done. He also explores collaborative contracting, risk allocation, and workforce pressures, and how technology and better work design could improve both productivity and well-being across the industry. Let's jump in. Hi, Andrew. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mana. How are you?
Yeah, we're really thrilled to be here today talking to you. If you could just briefly introduce yourself to our audience, that would be great.
Sure. Andrew Chapman. I'm the CEO of the Queensland Major Contractors Association, the QMCA, which represents all the major engineering construction companies in the state of Queensland. You know, the companies that are delivering the roads, the rail, the dams, the Olympic infrastructure, the energy transition infrastructure, everything that's not vertical building and residential building, the member companies of the QMCA do, and I represent them.
Sounds like a really broad membership organisation. So it's pretty much all your tier 1, tier 2 builders.
All your tier 1 construction companies. So the likes of CPB, John Holland, BLB, BMD, Fulton Hogan. There's 19 executive members.
Right.
And then we got another 9, what we call general members, which are sort of tier 2 companies are not quite at that tier 1 level. And then another 55 or thereabouts associate members. And they're all the companies that work with the tier 1s to deliver their scope of works. And that might be lawyers, engineers, accountants, surveying companies, recruitment, supply chain, subcontractors, all of those. So as an engineer who's been in the engineering construction industry for the last 30 odd years, it's a great industry to be in, and the QMCA really does sort of represent the whole of that construction industry in Queensland.
No, I mean, it's fascinating, and I guess it's no surprise. We were very keen to hear from you, hear what your members are thinking, importantly, to your pipeline report, obviously. And for those who don't know, one of the QMCA's most anticipated publications each year is the Queensland Major Projects Pipeline Report. And the latest report paints a fascinating picture of both the opportunities and the challenges facing the sector. So I'd love to unpack some of that with you. Yeah, so I think starting with deliverability and the pipeline. So the pipeline numbers in this year report are a record $1.5 billion of projects over the next 5 years.
So it's $127 billion over the next 5 years. And it's really interesting. When I started doing this pipeline report, when I joined the organisation in 2020,
wow,
that was sitting at $48 billion over the forward 5 years. That has increased to 127, including the games infrastructure. And everyone gets excited about the Olympic Games. And yes, it is something to get excited about, but it's not the big component of that spend going forward. There are many other areas where we're spending huge amounts of money, from energy transition, water sector, transport. Obviously, housing and health are big as well, but we don't cover those in that report. The resources sector is a big spend as well. Now, of that 127 billion, about over 70% of that is funded. So it's secure. It's going to happen. The rest of it is what we call the unfunded. And there's 3 categories within that. There's a credibly proposed, a prospective, and an unlikely. And as I like to call it, unlikely is the snowflake's chance in hell. The credibly proposed of those projects is they're in that planning, early development phase, or development phase at the moment, that they will fill in behind the funded works. And what's interesting is that they will fill in. And once they do, that number, that funded number plus the credibly proposed rises substantially. And we're going to see a huge amount of work going on in the state when you look at the funded plus the credibly proposed. It's a great time to be in Queensland. It's a great time to be in the engineering construction industry for sure.
No, yeah, I'll definitely have more questions about those funded and unfunded projects, but I guess maybe going back a step just to that pipeline. I mean, like you said, those numbers have jumped up significantly and everyone thinks, oh, wow, that's a huge amount of work. But beyond those headline figures, what's the real story that the report is telling us?
So the report really does paint a picture about what has to get done. Now, everyone goes, well, geez, 120 odd billion, how are you going to get it done? And I hark back to when we had the last big construction boom in Queensland, which was 2010-11 through to 2015-16. And in that period of time, we delivered in 2024 dollar figures, $112 billion worth of work in that 5-year period. Now, that was when we did 3 CSG LNG projects. So 3 new LNG plants in Gladstone, massive big coal seam gas expansion through the Surat Basin. We did 5 new coal mines. We did a couple of hospital projects, 3 railway projects, and a couple of port upgrades, all at the same time. So when you cast that forward to what we're looking to do, yes, there is more diversity this time. It's not just the resources sector. We've done it before, we can do it again. However, the challenges with it are obviously, and it's well publicised, it's always people. There's capacity in terms of our supply chain, particularly aggregates, and which go into road pavement, which go into asphalt, which go into concrete. There's also capacity constraints with our steel fabrication that we need to uplift. But there's also a big productivity challenge. I know I've cast back our productivity analysis a long period of time. And when you look at the period before 2010, 2005 to 2010, we were averaging an output in the industry, and this is the way I measure productivity, is an output per person, around about 1.3, 1.4 million per person. When we did the energy and resources boom, we were averaging 2.2 to 2.4 million per person per year. The last 5 years, we've averaged 820,000 per person per year. Now, these are all in 2023 dollar figures. So we've got a job to do to lift that productivity so that we can deliver the work in front of us. Now, if we did not lift the productivity, then we would need up to another, 35,000 people extra in just the major engineering construction projects, let alone any building, let alone any residential construction or other stuff. So we do have a lot of work in front of us and we've got to lift that productivity. But if we are able to lift productivity by 10% and we're able to lift the number of people in the industry by 10%, we can deliver everything in that pipeline.
Those are the $1 million questions, like how do you do those 2 critical things?
Exactly right. Yes. So it's very easy for me to say, a lot harder to do. And that's where we've got to be looking at initiatives around procurement, how we're able to speed up, not necessarily speed up procurement, but to make it more effective. So it's more collaborative. So we're de-risking the projects better. I mean, I have this age-old comment about procurement is that we find that clients hand over this information that they've been working on for 3-4 years. Here's all our information. Give us a price back in 4 to 8 weeks. And by the way, you can't rely on any of the information we've given you. What could go wrong? Everything. So what we need is far more collaborative procurement where the preferred delivery partner is chosen early. They can work with the client, work with their engineers or, lo and behold, architects and other third parties to understand the scope, to understand where the opportunities are, where you can bring innovation in, where you can do things differently. And that will help de-risk the project and give a better price and time certainty. And then you can get underway and get the job done. I don't know if you've read Bent Flyberg's book, How Big Things Get Done. It's a fascinating read if you do, but in it, he talks about think slow, act fast. And my view is similar thing. I've got a similar one, which is proper planning prevents poor performance. But essentially what you're saying is you're getting the contractor embedded early, that delivery partner, who can then understand how you're going to do it and de-risk it so that you can actually come in and deliver fast. Because if you suddenly just go, here's the stuff, go, you end up falling over your own feet. You're not planning it properly. You're at quandary with your client, how you're going to do it. If everyone's there together and can understand it, you can actually de-risk it. You can get a lot firmer price and time certainty on delivery. So for me, that's critical, and that helps us then deliver things more productively. Equally, industrial relations is a big area. We've seen far too much adversarial IR going on. When you think about some of the conditions that are being put to the industry, particularly by a certain union, I'll name them, CFMEU, you look at, fixed 26-day fixed RDO calendar. That's half a working day a week lost, averaged over the year. And then it's the deceleration time with the head of an RDO and a re-acceleration time. So you're losing, a good half to a day a week when you've got over a period of time with those RDOs. We have seen construction sites in Queensland, particularly in the building sector, with less than 3 effective working days a week. That's how they're operating. We need to lift that. We need to work more collaboratively and have give and take flexibility on some of these conditions and how we apply them. And it's not just the fixed RDOs. There's so many more things that we can do in that IR space. Then there's technology. As an industry, we are a bit of a technology laggard. We need to improve, granted, but we have to have willingness from our clients to work with us to be able to do that and to implement some of these technology improvements that can deliver big productivity improvements in the industry. It doesn't mean we're going to see less people employed in the industry. It just means that we're going to be able to deploy the finite resources that we do have better, and it will improve program, schedule, and safety. And that's the critical thing. We're talking about, productive sites are safe sites. Safe sites are productive sites. They go hand in hand. And if we can start to implement some of this technology, change the way that we deliver these projects, we can deliver them more efficiently. And yes, we're still going to need more people in the industry, but we're not going to need 50-odd thousand or 45,000 or whatever that Infrastructure Australia says we need. Those numbers will come dramatically down because we're able to improve our productivity. We're able to look at how we're using technology, how we're procuring more efficiently so that we're delivering better price and time certainty as well.
Yeah, no, those are really good insights. And we are seeing an increase in collaborative contracting, at least in the government procurement space, which is, I think, helpful. And maybe just turning back, I guess, to your funded and unfunded projects, you said that there were about 70% of the projects are funded, which is a significant proportion, but there's still a lot of projects waiting to get funding. And, how important is that distinction for contractors?
Oh, look, contractors look out and say, well, what's there in front of me? What can I know is going to come to market. So they will focus on that funded work. Now, that funded work is either in construction, in procurement, or announced. So it's got funding to it. They will focus on those, but equally for the longer term, they will start to look at, well, what's coming up in that credibly proposed area. I'm looking at 6 years. What's coming up that I need to focus on? And that might be in the water space. It might be the dam safety upgrade program. So knowing that that's very technical on brownfield dam work, if I know it's all in that credibly proposed area, what do I need to do to be able to get ready for that? What technical skills do I need? What technical partners do I need? What other construction partners might I need from either around Australia or from overseas? So they look at that workflow to work out, okay, there's less coming in, say, rail, there's more coming in water. What do I need to do to get ready for that? It's very interesting when you do look at it, though. Like, there's a lot of talk about, say, defence, for instance. A lot of infrastructure is going to be done in the defence sector across Northern Australia, and a lot of that fits in North Queensland, be it bases in Rockhampton, Townsville, Cairns, and north of Cairns. A lot of that isn't necessarily in the next, say, 3 or 4 years, but it starts to flow in from that 5th year onwards. Now, it's been announced by the federal government and has some level of funding put to it. So it sort of fits in that sort of that cusp of that announced area into the credibly proposed. So businesses start to look at that and go, okay, so there's $1 billion to be spent in North Queensland over the next 6 years. I'll start to work out how I can, if that's a focus area for me as contractor X, I will then start to work out what I need to do to position for that work now, whilst I'm still delivering the work in front of me.
Is the issue here now less about having enough work and more about making sure the industry can actually deliver it? And I think we know the answer.
Look, I think the work levels that are coming forward are right. I said a few years ago when I delivered the report, we're moving into a golden decade of the amount of work that has to get done. And it gives us as an industry an opportunity to invest in our people, invest in technology, invest in skills for the future. And that's where I see huge opportunity. Do I think that there is too much work? Look, if somebody went and said, let's do, and this is hypothetical now since the federal government killed it on, let's go and do inland rail in Queensland next year, I'd say don't, simply because that would add too much to the industry. We wouldn't be able to deliver it. But if somebody said, let's go and deliver inland rail in Queensland post 2031-32, I'd say that is perfect, because it's fitting into where we'll be rapidly doing a lot of work, not just for the games, but for economic infrastructure that will be there for decades to come, but it will be used for the games, like the Direct Sunny Coast Rail, the Wave, the Gold Coast Faster Rail upgrades, station upgrades, excluding, of course, all the venues, and the Bruce Highway upgrades and other stuff. That's all going to get done for 32. But what we don't want to happen is what happened in Sydney post 2000. We had a massive big building boom and then boom, hit this cliff, and it did. And there was no work or very little work for about 6 or 7 years. Now, the state government is acutely aware of that in Queensland. They're certainly in the planning stages of making sure that we don't have that drop. Now, there will be a drop, but we don't want it to be, like a death cliff. We need to make sure that projects happen afterwards. So if inland rail, for instance, was to get done, or they're going to do a high-speed rail somewhere in Queensland, like they're going to do down in Newcastle to Sydney, I would be programming that post 31, 32, because that's when stuff needs to get happened. And so if it's not absolutely critical for 32 at the moment, we're saying have a look at your timing and potentially start to plan it in post 30, 31, 32.
And I guess, having those conversations about sequencing things is important.
Yeah, look, sequencing is very important, because if you don't, what we end up with is this, massive push for labour, for resources, for materials that may not be able to be there. For plant and equipment, for instance, it's an 18-month lead time to be able to get some of this plant and equipment that you need to do work. So you can't just click your fingers and they fall off a shelf like at a department store. You've actually got to wait for it to be, you've got to put an order in, you've got to wait for it to be manufactured, you've got to wait for it to be imported to Australia, and then you've got to commission it. So it's not like an instantaneous thing. And if we keep loading up, then the demands, and we're not able to fix productivity as well, the demands for labour are just going to be through the roof. So we've got to balance those things. And that's what, as an industry and government, we are talking about at the moment, how you do it, what needs to get done and how it gets done.
Now, turning to, I guess, slightly different topics of risk allocation at contracting. And obviously risk allocation is one of those buzzwords as an infrastructure lawyer I hear every single day. Do you think we're making progress, or do you think there's still a gap between the way projects are being procured and what contractors are actually willing to take on?
I think we have made some strides in risk allocation, but we're not there. I've already seen this year some contracts being put to the sector which are saying, right, you're to take all the contaminated land risk, all the geotech risk, all the traffic management risk, all the community risk, all the Indigenous risk, with not native title, but Indigenous artefacts below the ground, etc. and or the services risk. Yet it's the client's own design. It's the client's site. That doesn't play well because the contractor has no ability to control those things. Some of the community risk, sure, how we interact and work within the communities, yes, 100%. How we manage traffic into and out of our sites, yes, but not the geo, not the contaminated land. There's no ability for us to control what is below the ground. So we've got to be realistic about what risks the contractor can take, what risks the client can take, and then what are the ones in between that can be managed together. And you can put some provisional sums aside, you can put some money aside for those things, but then understand how you're going to manage those risks, i.e. de-risking it. You're never going to completely de-risk a project, but at least you have tried to engineer out these risks as much as possible, and you understand what has been put aside and how it's put aside. When you can do that and you can manage risk better between the parties who are best to take it and then work at how you support each other to effectively manage it, then you're going to get a much better outcome. Just sitting there and going, here you go, here's all the risk, and you take all the responsibility with it. And by the way, I will still want the lowest price. You end up in a world of hurt. No one wins out of that. So we need to see far more collaborative procurement, in my view, and into delivery, particularly with these more complex type projects. Where you've got more simpler projects, you can still have collaborative procurement, but you can be much more firmer in terms of the price and time certainty out of it as well.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of contractors, when we're acting for contractors, being a lot more bold in saying this just won't work. But instead of obviously no, they're saying no, but then they're coming up with some really smart sort of risk sharing proposals, different ways of looking at things. So you're sort of not just telling people, yeah, we can do it. And then, down the track, nothing is done, or you're coming with claims or there's delays. I think I'm seeing more robust discussions.
And you want to have, it's that sort of comment I made before about Bent Flybeck, think slow, act fast. That think slow period is all your planning, all your understanding of those risks, so that when you come on site, you can deliver fast and more efficiently and more safely, and you've got less disputes. Because you think about the adversarial type contracts, you end up in, the project might take 18 months and you're still having dispute 18 months later. It's ridiculous. We've got to be spending more time to get it right up front so that we don't have that back end issue. The only people that win are, lawyers. But, that's a tongue-in-cheek comment, but let's be honest, we've got to be more efficient in the way we look at these projects, how we plan them, so that we can deliver more efficiently. And we're not seeing this wasted money and time and effort in these long-running disputes.
And I guess you're there with the contractors. What is the biggest disconnect that they're telling you that they're seeing in terms of this risk allocation? If you could choose one or two.
Oh, look, for me, it's the age-old. If you look at the biggest three risks on a civil construction project, traffic, PUP, and geotech. So if you can start to de-risk that PUP early and have a more cleaner site, so when people get on site, they don't have these issues, or they're a lot less, and clearly defined what work needs to happen in that PUP utility space, that helps. With geotech, I think the critical thing there is actually getting a good understanding of what geotech issues or understanding of the site, so that everyone can work together and know where the bounds are. And the contractor might be able to say, look, I can manage the geotech within these running lanes. Outside of that, that's where you might have to step in, Mr. Client. And you've got clear issues, like if I'm doing a big road and I've got a poor subgrade that just happens to have been there, wet spot, big wet patch, or that needs to be dealt with, rather than constantly, trying to rework it, quick fire solutions like dig it out, replace it with rock and geofab, move on. Solutions like that can be quickly implemented would give really good results, and people know where they stand, and you can easily manage those things better. And then, of course, traffic. We've got to be able to manage traffic in a way that is safe for the workers, safe for the travelling public, particularly on roads, for instance, but do it in a way that, the client just doesn't say, you can't work these hours, or you're being pushed to work, midnight or something like that. We've got to look at balance those things up to better manage traffic as well. So I think, yes, there are some strides being made. Can we do it better? Yes. Are we seeing it happen? I think, yes, we are, but it needs to be more widespread.
I mean, given how, large the pipeline is, are you seeing contractors being more selective about the projects that they actually bid for? Or is it the case that people can't be picky? If something comes up, you don't know if you're going to win, so you've just got to put your hat, your hat in the ring?
I've been through periods. I've worked in Tees and Seymour White and companies like that, and I've been through the feast and famine of the industry. And yes, when there is a lot of work on, contractors do start to become quite picky. I saw an example of a project recently for a client where originally there was a certain number of parties submitted their EOI, and they shortlisted a lot of them. And then a lot of the parties just went, you know what, we've got other things to worry about. We'll go, and particularly when they started seeing contractual items, they said, you know what, we've got other projects we can go and worry about. So that, yes, you will see people start to pick and choose a lot more. Now, I haven't seen that fully happen yet, simply because whilst the pipeline is very big, the projects are only really starting to flow into procurement now. So by the time later this year, and certainly early next year, a lot more contractors will be picky about what they go for. They will be going for the projects where they think they've got a unique advantage or a unique selling proposition, or they know it really well, they've worked on a previous stage. That's the kind of projects that they'll be going for, rather than going for everything. Because we will, by this time next year, the industry is going to be exceptionally busy, and it will be at that rate for at least 5 years.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like a bright future. And I guess turning now to the future for our last up sort of segment, I guess looking ahead over the next 3 to 5 years, what concerns you most about the industry's abilities, about what's coming? And your face seems to say everything I need to know, but for the people who can't see your face, what worries you?
Oh, look, productivity worries me. We've been on a downward spiral with productivity, and I talk overall productivity, procurement, regulations, approvals. I mean, we've seen procurement timeframes blow out double over the last number of years. We've seen approvals taking far too long. So if you look at, say, a project north of Brisbane, rail project, it sat in EPBC approvals process for 4 years. It is a project that is in its own corridor. So why are we sitting in EPBC approvals for something that's in its own corridor for 4 years? This is ridiculous. So we've got to streamline those things. We've got to streamline how we are more effective in our procurement process so that we can, think slow, act fast, and proper planning prevents poor performance. So we've got to bring those mandates to view. And then we've got to look at how we manage things on site, our work design. I have this view that if we keep going the same way we are with industry culture, and that means poor behaviours from third-party stakeholders, impact people's mental health. If we don't address those issues, we're not going to be able to attract or retain people in the industry. So we need to improve that. And that comes down to how we manage IR, but also how we work design as well. For instance, why do we think everyone needs to rock up at 5 or 6 in the morning and be there till 4 in the afternoon? Why can't we split shift? One that starts at 6, finishes at 12, one that starts at 11, finishes at 5. When you actually do the mapping of safety incidents, you find that most of the safety incidents, percentage-wise, occur after lunch because people are starting to get tired. They're also had lunch, your body's consuming the food, the nutrients that you've given it, and you get that lull phase. And that's when a lot of incidents and accidents and safety issues happen. So if we're able to shift the dial so that you're working a more defined period of time, not longer, you will work more efficiently, more productively.
That's a real mindset. It sort of reminds me of the 4-day week people are trying to do in corporate. I think you need a whole mind shift, right? A whole change of.
Yeah, like everyone talks about the 4-day week and blah, blah, blah. Ask someone if they want to work 12 hours a day, 4 days a week. Answer's
Don't
probably
ask a
no.
lawyer because we.
No, you already do it. And don't ask an engineer designing something because they're already doing it too. So we've got to be more sensible in how we design our work structures to be able to attract and retain people. There was a thing put out by ACA and the Construction Industry Culture Task Force called the Construction Industry Culture Framework. I think that's what it was called. And it spoke about a 5-day working week, but spread over like 6, and different things you could do to help create a better work-life balance. So we're bound to attract different people into the industry, and we've got to look, there's some really good stuff in that. We've got to now start to contextualize that and put it into a tactical, what does it actually mean on the ground? Easy to write on a piece of paper. You've got to put it into practice. So what can you do around some of those initiatives? We've got to start looking at that kind of stuff. I mean, the age-old definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. So we've got to be embracing technology better. Does that mean that some people might get displaced from a role they may have done for 30 years? Potentially. But what it means is we can reskill them to manage that automation, manage that equipment, or to go ahead and do other tasks. It doesn't mean they're going to be lost to the industry. We're still going to need more people. But it just means that we can do things more efficiently. If you all look at, say, building slabs, for instance, why can't we be doing them, a lot of them precast? Or if we're going to be requiring a lot of reinforcing steel and post-tensioning and stuff on slabs, there are robotics now that will place and tie reinforcing steel on bridge decks, on building slabs. Now, if you were, and they work 24 hours a day, they're electric, they're battery operated. So if you were to use that, you can start to speed up your construction process. Yeah, and tying steel is a very it's a task that is dangerous from a lot of slips, trips and falls. You're working with steel and the like. So, and you're in the hot sun. But if a robot could get ahead and do that, and potentially overnight, you can come in, check it, start pouring, or get ahead of it with the formwork and the column reo that the robotics not necessarily can't do. So it's about speeding up your construction process. There's some really good stuff out of the UK on a major power plant being built over there. One of the contractors looked at how they used pre-assembled reinforcing cages for all the foundations. This is just one element. They basically assembled them 20-ton Rio bar cages in a factory, all automated. So read the building information management model in, did all the bending, all the placing, all the tying. You then took those Rio cages, 20-ton Rio cages to site, placed them in the foundations, did the final hook up and poured the concrete. A 58% reduction in man hours on site. What that resulted in was a 28% improvement in schedule. So we can do it. Now that's not schedule overall, but certainly on that element. So that while you're speeding up that element, you can get ahead. Your whole critical path starts to change. We've got to be embracing that technology more, and we've got to do it quickly. And that means we've got to have clients, contractors, engineers, all involved early on how you're going to do it, how you're going to deliver it. So the design is around how you're going to build it, not trying to work out how I'm going to build to a design.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that technology piece is a whole conversation in its own. We could sit for whole, hours and talk to that, and we might in the future. Definitely worth exploring.
I mean, I look at our productivity, and in that report last year, we did some analysis on how we could lift productivity and the output that was done in the industry. An improvement in the output that was done from a previous year, IR changes, industry culture, procurement, and the like. And you can get there. But technology, when you start to look at that technology piece and the potential it has to improve productivity and schedule by up to 30%, that's the big golden ticket. And that's what we need to be focused on.
All right. Well, one final question. If we were sitting here in 2030, I'll say 2032 because you talked about that year. So I feel that that's important. Looking back, what would success look like for Queensland construction and infrastructure sector from your perspective?
From my perspective, we've delivered some amazing infrastructure for 2032, for the Brisbane Games. Be it the stadiums, everything, the rail, the roads, the water, the power, etc. But what success looks like to me is an industry that has really gone out there and done some world-class engineering and construction activity and can then use that knowledge to export to the rest of the world. Now, that might be through building capacity in our supply chains. It might be through, different construction approaches and methodologies, but it's the knowledge and capability that we have built up over the next 6 years, we can then export to the rest of the world. That is what success would look like to me. Not only just delivering the infrastructure on time and on budget, but also building capability that we can sell to the rest of the world with Australian know-how.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a fantastic conversation and really appreciate your insights, sharing your knowledge of the Queensland market, the challenges around delivery, productivity, risk allocation. I'll say productivity twice because I know you really care about that. And I guess where the industry needs to go and how to set itself up for success. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. It was fun. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to Building Tomorrow, the Society of Construction Law Australia podcast.
The Society of Construction Law Australia is a national organisation of members at all stages of their professional career, with a shared interest in construction law.
For more info about the Society of Construction Law Australia, head to their website, scl.org.au. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Sound Cartel.
To make sure you don't miss an episode of Building Tomorrow, be sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app.
And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Mawuna Matanda.
I'm Bijay Lamsal.
And I'm Jennifer Raphael. And we'll see you in the next episode of Building Tomorrow.